Hi, welcome to our show today. I'm joined by my co-host Susan Bainbridge and today's guests Camilla Ross and Josh Rivedal. Today's show contains information that might be sensitive to some of our viewers. We will be discussing suicide awareness and prevention. We want you to know that today's show is not a substitute for psychological intervention, and if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, we suggest that you call 911, go to your nearest hospital, or seek professional help. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the facts surrounding suicide. According to the National Foundation of Suicide Prevention, in 2013, over 41,000 people committed suicide, making suicide the 10th leading cause of death in America. And it also means that in that particular year, someone in the country died every 12.9 minutes. This week alone, we've heard numerous stories about suicide. Some of those have been cases of where a young woman is charged with manslaughter for encouraging her friend to commit suicide. Other stories that we've heard in the news were actually hopeful and are a means to preventing suicide. One of those involves Facebook. Facebook has just instituted an app that's a suicide prevention app in which if you are concerned about a friend or family member who may have suicidal ideation, you can contact that friend directly, you can contact other family or friends, or you can contact Facebook, and Facebook will send out a warning or message to that friend and provide resources for them. So today we want to talk a little bit about suicide awareness and prevention, but I want to introduce to you two people who've done a lot of work in this area. One is Camilla Ross, who was with us before, perhaps about 2 or 3 episodes before. And just to remind you, Camilla is a theater producer with the Emerson Theater Collaborative, and she's been in theater for over 30 years, even though she looks really, really young, we know. But she's produced a number of plays and has participated in commercials as well. But we're also joined by Josh Rivedal. And Josh is an actor, an author, a playwright, an international speaker. He just came back from Australia, and he's been telling us how warm it was there compared to how cold it is here in Connecticut. Josh has a project called the I Am Worthy Project and the I'm Possible Project, excuse me. Josh will talk to us a little bit more about those projects and his own story. And so I'm going to reserve our time, rather than giving you a long introduction about him, to reserve our time for us to really get in depth with some issues that are so important for us to talk about today. So I want to begin the show today talking about the I Am Worthy Project, and Josh and Camilla have worked together on that project, and I think that they can tell us a bit about how that project came about. I know Camilla produced it and Josh starred in it, so who wants to start with telling us what the I Am Worthy Project is about?
I don't mind starting us off. It was the brainchild of Camilla Ross, the I Am Worthy Project, and it was fascinating and amazing to see someone so dedicated to bettering the community and to have a heart and mind for suicide prevention. And so she had been sort of brainstorming this and working it out, and she knew that I had been working in suicide prevention for a couple years. I do a play that talks about my father's suicide, in part talks about that. There's some other stuff going on there, and how effective it has been in communities, colleges, universities, conferences, etc. And so, so I came on board and sort of hopefully enhanced, I think we enhanced what Camilla had and what she had going on, and so we put that on in 2013, and it really was an entire community event. I mean, you're talking about bringing people, that's what it's about, it's bringing people together and having this open and honest discussion, this frank conversation about the systemic challenges behind suicide and awareness and prevention. So there was the first responders, firemen, policemen, congresspeople, churches, workers, and so it was really, and not every single group sort of showed up, but a lot of them supported in kind and name and stuff like that. And so, I think Hillary said it takes a village, and so that's really what I think Camilla's mindset was when it came to the I Am Worthy project.
So why did you want to do the I Am Worthy project? What sparked you?
I've had so many personal experiences with people, who have committed, and I think our youth that are struggling more so. And there are policemen, there are firemen, there are public people that also struggle with that. And to be able to give them a platform to have a conversation with no shame. There is no shame because we don't understand all that is all about. Mm-hmm. And so to allow them to come and to talk about that and experience with others, and so that the community can come in and help where it's needed.
I think that's really just so powerful. I know in the work that we do, we come across people all the time who have thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves or kill themselves, and we're finding more and more. If you look at the news, as you said, it's not just young people, it's people in all walks of life. Even yes. We've had ministers who, within the last year, several have been reported to have committed suicide. Children of ministers who have, as you say, firefighters, policemen. I just read a story today, as a matter of fact, about a policeman who committed suicide and also killed 2 of his children in the process as well. And so we need to make people aware of this, and that according to the National Foundation of Suicide Prevention, over 90% of suicides are related to mental health issues, and we often don't want to talk about the mental health problems that people have, and the more we talk about it, the more we can help prevent right. people from committing suicide.
I think that's a great point. Mental health conditions, issues aren't mutually exclusive to suicidal thinking, but when it goes untreated because of stigma, and folks think that someone who's experiencing depression or bipolar disorder or something like that, there's often the stigma that I'm less of a person, or when in reality you've done nothing to get this condition. It's a real and treatable thing like a kidney disease or heart disease, and so we need to start treating people dealing with these conditions in the same manner, because then treatment will happen, and then they'll be able to live a better life.
That's right. And I think it's also important to say that just because a person has mental illness, it does not mean that they are suicidal too. I want to make sure that we bring that point up. But
we also need to let them know that they are loved and respected, because it's not something that they called upon themselves. And it's a part of living in life, and we need to respect them as people and love them as people.
So tell me about the project then. Tell me how the I Am Worthy project helped your viewers and your audience. What's been some of the responses that you've gotten? And
I think people, youth, people in general, realize that suicide is preventable, and that they're not alone, and that there's support, and that there's a loving community around them, and sometimes it's difficult to latch onto that because you're afraid how people are going to respond. And sharing my own story, not just as someone who's lost a loved one to suicide, but has also experienced suicidal thinking themselves. In 2011, I nearly made an attempt on my life, and so I shared that story and shared how I got help and how I'm no less of a person than anyone in the room who may or may not have had suicidal thinking. And so I think when people hear stories, storytelling is the thing that's going to save us. The beginning of any great movement has had a story behind it. Civil rights movement, suffragettes, the list goes on. India's independence, it's a story. And people, their hearts and minds need to be one. And in this case, with mental health and suicide prevention, their hearts and minds need to be one, and there's education that goes along with it. So I think we're pushing forward in that direction, and by sharing stories, and mine specifically, people realize that I'm not alone. They themselves are not alone, and that it's possible to get help, and hope and healing and living life is possible. Right?
So tell us a little bit about your story, if you don't mind.
Not at all. I don't mind at all. I tell all the time. So I have a background, and this is all relevant. I have a background in acting, and so I lost my father in 2009, and he lost his father in the late 1960s, and both to suicide. Both went untreated. They had some issues that went untreated. My grandfather with post-traumatic stress. My own father, I think, was post-traumatic stress and maybe some bipolar disorder, definitely depression. And so they lost their lives. They didn't talk about it. My own father, there was so much stigma in my home that we weren't allowed to talk about it. My dad didn't even know that his children knew. My mom had to tell us in secret because he was so embarrassed and so ashamed at something that he had no control over.
Right.
So then he passed away in 2009. Out of that, I created this one-person show that goes by 2 titles. It's either The Gospel According to Josh, or now it's Kicking My Blue Jeans in the Butt. And so there's sort of two sitting side by side, but it's the same content.
Ironically, though, the genes is G-E.
G-E-N-E-S, yeah.
Which is very different.
DNA,
yes,
indeed, yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Right, exactly. So I lost my dad, and I guess like any other actor, comedian, or the guy at the local coffee shop who says life has dealt them a bad hand, I created this one-person show. And it's a comedy, 30 characters, a bunch of songs. Anyone from Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, I play these characters for a brief moment in the piece, my dad, etc. I won't do that now.
Well, that's okay. You can play Ella if you want to. As soon as you said that, I'm going, how can you play
Ella? Anyway.
So you're our first scatter on the show.
Not the last. There'll be a scat session every week now. So I lost him. 2009, I wrote this piece, The Gospel According to Josh / Kicking My Blue Jeans in the Butt, into 2010, put it up in New York City. Did well. I had people at the end tell me, I lost grandma, uncle, so-and-so, haven't talked about it in 10 years. Thanks for speaking out. And I was like, yeah, okay, I don't get that, but cool. This is just a piece of theater. Didn't quite get the whole storytelling thing.
Sure.
End of 2010 into 2011, I lost my dad. I was going through a difficult time with my mom. She essentially betrayed me, and then I lost my girlfriend of 6 years. Decided it was time to go too. She'd left me. So 3 people in the span of 19 months.
Yeah.
As we know, I didn't know then, but as we know, major change can often be a catalyst for suicidal thinking. I was also experiencing some clinical depression that I was avoiding, and so I went into this 6-week-long major depression that culminated in me feeling like I wanted to die, and I couldn't eat. I wanted to. I couldn't sleep. I would cry at the drop of a hat. And I was isolating. I wasn't paying attention to my mental health or my physical health. And I was in physical pain. And I nearly made an attempt. And thankfully, there was something inside my head that said, you got to ask for help. You got to do something. Your dad and granddad were here, and there's probably something that you can do. I didn't know what it was. I took a risk, and I called my mom, who I wasn't having a good relationship with at the time. She ended up becoming my mom again. She helped save my life. She helped talk me through that, and gave me just enough of an opening to seek more help. So I started reaching out to friends and family and loved ones and people who I saw as the positive people in my life, and sort of letting the negative ones go, because we're the company that we keep, right?
Sure.
Absolutely.
And then I sought out some therapy, and I sought out I was finding my spirituality again, because I was very wounded by how I was raised and that sort of brand of spirituality, but I found it in my own way. Creativity and creative writing was good. So there was a recovery process that happened, and it took about 9 months to feel sort of like Josh again. And it wasn't linear. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which is important, I think, for people to realize, because it's not a magic pill or 4 therapy sessions and then you're better. It's work. It's interesting work, and a lot of the things.
It's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's very
but it's
hard
great work though,
too.
because
Yes.
the stuff that I put into my life are all good habits now. It's not work anymore. And so it's intriguing and great. And so coming out of that, I then decided I need to help other people to feel whole again. So I took that show, The Gospel According to Josh, condensed it, and put some education behind it, got training in suicide prevention, and how to talk about it in a safe way, and then put a Q&A at the end, a question and answer, and I pitched it around and nobody quite knew what to do with it. And then a professor at Brew College in New York City decided he wanted to try it out. We put it up at the university, at the college there, in May of 2011, just 4 months after my suicidal crisis, and didn't quite know how it was going to be received, but at the end, the student got help.
Well, and I think that's what's important, and what I think is critical. I mean, because you said a lot in in your story there, but the first thing that was most important is that you sought out help.
Yes.
And I think it's so important that if you are in a place where you're feeling suicidal, seek help, even from the most unlikely people, because Josh
Absolutely.
just said that
That's right.
he had a bad relationship with his mother, but that's who he sought out. And sometimes we have to let go of whatever those barriers are that are stopping us from getting help. And so you went to your mother, that was the opening. It's not the end-all, be-all. And sometimes, quite frankly, you'll go to therapy and you'll still struggle with these thoughts and feelings, which is important. You know, I know that when Susan and I have worked with people, sometimes we've had people who struggle with it every single day of their lives and for years. But it's about learning how to cope with those feelings and what to do with those feelings when you have them. It doesn't mean they're going to go away sometimes. You're fortunate.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to that seeking out help. You know, people want to help, and sometimes they don't quite know how to do it. It just so happens that my mom somehow, I don't know if it was her motherly instincts or whatever, but she did a lot of the right things in that phone call. There was a little bit of trying to fix it, and then after that wasn't working and I was getting upset, she stopped and she just listened to me. And that's one of the best things you can do for somebody. Sit there and listen.
Exactly. That's exactly what we were talking about.
Don't try to fix it, because my brain fixes things differently than your brain, than your brain, than your brain. So when I'm in crisis and my emotions are up here and you're trying to fix my problem and I don't understand that, I'm not going to be able to rationalize that you're trying to help, and I think you don't get me. And so then the window for you to help me is closed. Almost entirely, maybe not entirely, but a lot. So she listened to me. She wasn't judgmental. It wasn't think about your family, think about this, think about that. There was this idea that there's an opportunity. There's you know, for you to, maybe there's a responsibility. And when I talk to people, and I've talked to people who are suicidal before, and then referred out to professional help. But I've said, you know, if I hear an opening, you have kids and they're going to miss you. What do you think your kids would say? Who's going to take care of those bunny rabbits if you're not there to do it? Who's going to take care of those puppies? Who's going to feed Mr. Johnson on the park bench? Who's going to do that? They're going to miss you. You know, so getting just that little spark.
Well, and that's important. Doesn't always.
I was going to say, yeah, and that's a very delicate process. Looking for that opening, because looking for something that motivates future thinking is very subtly different, but in a very important way, to adding guilt to the burden that somebody depressed is already carrying. And I think even professionals make that mistake, I think, sometimes where and I've actually heard someone say this, you know, that's so selfish of you. How could you think about your mother? She would never recover from that. She would just be a disaster for the rest of her life, and your twin sister, and you know, so that doesn't help somebody who's depressed, because they've got enough guilt as it is. And a lot of times, one of the things that Terralyn and I were talking about yesterday was that there is often a place that you reach when you are feeling suicidal where it's not at all a selfish thing. If anything, there's often a thought process of people would be better off without me. I'm just causing pain and problems and worry, and if I'm gone, then that disappears for the people that I care about. So it's not at all like, oh, I'm thinking I'm going to do this and then they'll be sorry. You know, they're not thinking about hurting somebody else. They're thinking about making life easier for those they love, and that's really.
But you know, the younger generation, it's love you to say that, because I had a young girl say, if she only knew how much people loved her, if she only knew how much people loved her, that is so important, to know that they are loved. And what does that mean when we talk about love? It's unconditional, it's pure.
And I think the complicated thing about, you know, even this discussion that we're having is that each person, the story is different for each person. Because for some people it might simply be, I need to know how much I'm loved. For other people it might be, this depression is so great that I think my family would be better off without me. And then for other people, I know ones that I've worked with, sometimes it's a matter of, I can't tolerate this pain anymore, and I just wish that I could walk in front of a car, and that maybe they won't do it, but that's what they want to do. And I think it's a complicated.
You talk about that, and when we did the I Am Worthy project, there was a woman there with her husband, and she said, my son wanted to alleviate us having to go through the pain anymore.
Yes.
And that was a very unselfish act.
Exactly.
You know, according to them.
And I think what's really crucial about what you're saying and what Josh started saying in terms of how we talk with people about this, the two things that really annoy me is when people say a person committed suicide because they were selfish or cowardly. And we know that people say that. An anchor man got into trouble for saying, and I don't remember which one it was, that when Robin Williams committed suicide, that it was a cowardly act. And I will say, in my younger years of therapy, I'm going to out myself here. There was an incident very early on when I was first starting out, and I was in graduate school, and a young woman in undergraduate committed suicide. And I saw the pain in my partners, who was a therapist, a fellow therapist with me. I saw the pain that she went through, and I did think of it as a selfish thing in my young, unexperienced mind, because I could see the pain and hurt of the people who were left. But as I've grown in my therapeutic awareness, I understand that people are in such dire pain that if you get to that point where you think it's the only way out, what pain must you be in to feel that?
Yeah.
And so for people to kind of say, it's a very selfish thing. Now, we do know that there are people, maybe not everyone has a mental health issue. Maybe there are people who commit suicide for other reasons that could be selfish, but that's not the majority of people. And I think we need to get rid of that.
I would say that people don't want to die. They just don't want to be in the emotional or physical pain that they're in.
Yeah.
In fact, I was there. You know, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to feel like that anymore.
Sure.
So I lacked coping skills. I lacked skills because all I saw in my family was, it doesn't go your way, you take your life. And obviously that's not something that needs to happen or should happen. But going through recovery, I found other coping skills. And initially it was talking, and then it was more talking, and then it was friends and family, until it became 10, 12, 15, 18 pieces of coping skills.
But what do you think it was for you, Josh? If that was your pattern, because most of us respond to situations based on the patterns and things that we learn in our families, good or bad. What do you think it was in you that said, no, I'm not going to go out like that. I'm not going to follow my father and my grandfather's pattern?
There was a few things, and I think one of them was a little bit of guilt. Now, I'll say that, and I'll say whoever's on the other side of that, you're talking to someone who's going through something like this, it's not up to you to put on the guilt. Let that person get there themselves, because that's not helpful. But the fact that I got there myself and felt guilty about leaving behind a parent and a brother and a sister who had already gone through this with their dad, that was one thing. There was a chance that I could have some adventures. You know, I didn't know what they were. I just knew that there's people out there that are doing things that I want to do, and maybe I could do that too. There was just really, it was a tiny spark, and I was sitting on the fence between life and death, and it could have gone either way, and I sort of took almost a risk, you would say, at least in my mindset then and there, that let's try life, let's see one more time. And so I think people are in that place a lot. A friend of mine was on the Golden Gate Bridge. His name's Kevin Hines. He's a good friend, and
I hope Kevin is okay with you.
Kevin is fine.
Outing his name on.
He's fine because he speaks about this. Right. He's a prominent public speaker in this arena. So hi Kevin. But he was walking along the Golden Gate Bridge, and he was getting ready to make an attempt on his life, and he was like, he thought to himself, if only somebody said hi to me and then wanted to talk to me on this. Obviously, he wasn't in his right mind entirely, but then and there, he was like, if somebody did stop him, but they asked him to take their picture, and they moved along. So he just was looking for a kind word and a kind hand. And I came across, when I was in Australia recently, a gentleman I was serving on a panel with. He serves on this. He started this organization called Mates in Construction, and it's essentially peers helping peers. And and he said, we need to stop thinking about it as help-seeking behavior and talking about it as help offering. We need to help one another and be there for one another. And I think that's I Am Worthy. I think that's what we try to do with I Am Worthy, and say, not only do we need to like tell people that that it's okay to live and that it's okay to be, we also need to be there for these people and be that safety net.
It's community.
It is, but you know, for me, what you just said was also a God moment. Because I think what we put out there to say that we want, he was crying out in that moment for help, if only someone. Now, it doesn't mean that it happens all the time, but for me, when you said that, that was a God moment of that person stepping up there to say, can you take a picture? And he responded to that. You know, it maybe wasn't what he wanted that person to say, but he responded. And what we put out there, we can absolutely get back.
And I don't know if any of you have heard about some of the things that go on, particularly on the Golden Gate Bridge, but because it's a pretty old bridge, there are constantly people doing work on various parts of the bridge. And there, I guess on National Public Radio, on NPR, a couple of years ago, they did an I guess maybe it was one of the little recordings that they do of people's stories, the StoryCorps.
StoryCorps.
Yes.
Where they set up little booths and whatever. And one of the things was somebody who worked on the Golden Gate Bridge and was talking about the fact that, I have to deal with people wanting to jump and seeing this. And he spoke about how he responds to that, and that he always reaches out to those people if he can. And a wonderful, wonderful artist who actually she's bipolar, and she did an album of music about her struggle with bipolar disorder and getting through it. And one of the songs is called Gatekeeper, about this guy who worked on the Golden Gate Bridge, saying, I will just ask, these simple things. How are you feeling? What are your plans for tomorrow? Will you let me make some, and after, you can do as you will. So there was no sort of trying to force someone's hand in one direction or another, no shaming, no, just asking, just being there, and as you said, listening. It is one of the most powerful things you can do.
I think it gets back to, we're talking about this community piece. Sometimes we can see people looking sad, and we walk past them, we don't say a word, and you never know if you just say hello to them.
A simple hello.
How was your day? Just to engage them. We've lost that, and I think we particularly lose it when we're so wedded to our technology and we're looking down all the time, we're not paying attention, but you never know how you can reach someone just by even smiling at them and letting them know that they're important, that they exist.
When I ask people, do you know your neighbor? Do you know your neighbor as well as you know yourself? The answer is no. We need to get to know our neighbor again.
Yeah.
And it's something as simple as hello. Here's a great example. I went to the Naval Clinic today for a consultation, and a doctor came in, and I said, hello. He said nothing.
And he came in to examine you?
No, he came in to just talk to the nurse that I was speaking to. But because he came in, I said, hey, hello. He just went right by, didn't say hello, spoke to the nurse, he left. I was going to say goodbye, but I didn't say it. I already made the introduction to say hello. Sometimes we get so busy in our everyday life that we don't even take a moment to recognize that today is a day, and to say hello to someone is a difference between life and death for them.
I want to talk just for a minute about, Josh, you mentioned that through your process, you got back in touch with your spirituality, and you talked about being wounded by religion. And I know as a Christian minister, what used to be said years ago, and not so many years ago, because people still ask me about this today, in terms of just talking about suicide, and suicide being something that's unforgivable that if you commit suicide, you won't go to heaven, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think we talk about it quite as much as we used to in that way, because we understand that that for one, it's not helpful to say that to people. I think maybe for some people they decide not to do it, but for other people who are really struggling, it puts that guilt on them even more. But I want to talk a bit about how do various religious sects, in you all's opinion, kind of handle this issue? What's been your experience? What have you heard? I do know from my perspective, I'm hearing more and more churches really get involved with mental health issues in general. Absolutely. And so I think they're starting to understand.
I want to take on that. When we started this project, I went to my senior minister, Stacey Emerson, and I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? She went over everything. She said, I would love to be involved. And that is so crucial and so key that our clergy and our churches get involved.
Yes.
Because that is part of the ministry, is helping people. And when they come to your door, that is part of that.
I think ministers are understanding more, because in many churches there are pastoral counseling facilities, offices there. I think people are understanding more. Yes, we can pray about things, but there are just some things that you need more than prayer for.
You need to be involved.
Not that God isn't involved with your healing, but there are some things that we're just going to have to deal with, and we need to do the work that we have
and so I'm thankful for her, because she was actively engaged in the process, helping me get the program to where it needed to be.
Great.
And so that is really what we need in our community, is community getting on board with whatever it is that's happening and becoming actively engaged in the process of creating better, happier, healthier lives for its community, because that spreads.
Sure.
Church is a last stop for a lot of people, and in good ways and bad ways, in their lives, I mean. And so, just like any other system, a school, government, the Kiwanis Club, whatever it is that you belong to, we need to have those communities equipped with having healthy and open and honest conversations and helpful conversations. And churches is no exception. I think there are a lot of good things happening right now. I happen to serve on the advisory board for Elijah's Journey, which is a Jewish response to suicide prevention. I'm not Jewish. I also don't happen to be religious either, but I realize how important that is, and how important that is to have that conversation. My father was a very religious man in the Christian faith, and when he went to his pastoral counseling, they told him he was a sinner and needed to get his life right, instead of sitting there and listening to him and talking with him and being open and honest. And they didn't know how to deal with it, so they gave that easy textbook answer that wasn't the right answer. And so we need to have the conversations. I also think pastors or whomever, not all, some, need to be careful about how they approach this side of things, because in some states in the U.S., you can call yourself a counselor just because you're a pastor. However, the two are not mutually exclusive. Just because you're a good minister does not mean that you're good on the one-on-one.
That's exactly why I think that I'm different as a psychiatrist and a minister, because I handle it differently. But Josh, I just want to add a little something too, just in terms of thinking about the messages that ministers preach from the pulpit. Because sometimes you have people who are already so severely depressed, and when you get up and you're preaching about things that are inherent to a person and who they are, and you're telling them that it's wrong to be that way or to do X, Y, and Z, you're wounding that person over and over and over again. I've had people to come into my office and will say, well, I just don't think I can be X, Y, and Z because the Bible says that this is wrong. And these are people who are severely depressed. And I keep thinking, and for instance, people who are gay, and I'll say, well, maybe if you come out of the closet, it would help a little bit of the depression that you are experiencing. But no, because my faith tells me that I can't be. And as a result, some of these people have been severely, severely depressed and have thought about suicide. So we have to also be careful as ministers when we're preaching whatever it is from the pulpit, and we don't know whether we're wounding people. It could be something about mental health. It could be other things. You just have to be careful and make I know that people want to preach what they believe in, and I respect that. But I also think that there's a way that you can deliver a message where people can hear it and not be led to feel.
I agree. I think, on that, how we look at things, how we view things, how we look at people is so important. God is love to me, and I don't know any other way to look at that. And so when I look at Josh, I see Josh as love. And I think people, when they look at the Bible for me is a guide of how to live. It doesn't say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It is a time, it is a guide. Today's time is different than that time. We need to change the way we think. We need to change how we treat people. Everyone is a person.
So here's where I would differ a little bit in terms of just from a theological perspective. I think everything under the sun is the same as it used to be. And I think that much of what's written, yes, we do need to look at it from a historical, cultural perspective, but I think that we need to also know theologically what it meant, because some things that we assume what they meant, even for that time, is talking about something different. And
Absolutely.
So while I respect that you're saying it's a guide, because I've often used that language myself, I still see it as completely relevant to how we live now. But if we just looked at what I consider the two greatest commandments, which is what you'll see on my website about loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, it gets back to what you're saying about love. And so when we see people in pain, when people are hurting, it is important for us to be able to tap into what's going on with them. And that listening piece that you talked about earlier is so critical. Susan and I were having conversations about this yesterday, because what's important is when a person comes to talk to you about feeling suicidal, it's not about you in that moment, but we make it about us.
Just going back to the what different religions and sects are doing, the only of the three Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, the only one that actually explicitly forbids suicide is Islam. However, I've spoken to some imams, and it's a great opportunity. And I say the same things to rabbis, and I say the same things to pastors. Before you get to that point where you say this is taboo, and this is something we don't do, and this is something that you may or may not go to hell over or whatever, there is so much in this book about compassion and love and kindness.
Yes.
You go to 1 Kings when Elijah was in his crisis moment and he was ready to take his life. He asked God to take his life. God didn't tell him, I can't believe you, you're so bad, you're so this, you're so that. He sent him an angel, and he nourished Elijah back to health. And we can be that angel for each other. We have that opportunity, and we need to take those small moments in whatever book we're in, Buddhism, Hinduism. There's all these things. We put a lot on it. We put a lot of ugly window dressing on a lot of this stuff, and we put a lot of words in mouth. But when it goes back to when it goes back to the actual what these books are about, they're about love and kindness and compassion and helping one another out. And at their base.
Right, and I think that if we could explore that, then we can be true to ourselves when we go through those moments of feeling that. Because I think many people go through a period of like, boy, I just wish I could just walk out on life, But we don't want to admit that. We don't want to talk about when we feel like life is so overwhelming that we want to walk out. But many people feel that way.
They do.
And we don't open the door to talk about it. So if you say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Really? Are you doing fine? Susan and I have this thing that where we'll ask each other how you're doing, and she'll go, I'm all right.
Hanging in there.
And I was like,
I'm surviving.
What does that mean? Because I ask a ton of questions, and I pay attention to like, are you really okay, or are you just saying that in the moment? And if I pass you on the street and ask you how you're doing, I'm listening for what you say. I'm not just keep
But it's
going.
okay not to be okay.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I want people to know that If you're not feeling okay, it's okay to not feel that way. Nobody should be, I don't know anybody that's happy all the time, anybody that's sad all the time. Everybody has a mixture of emotions. But when we're in tune with one another, we will know. It's this beautiful energy that comes across.
So what I'm wondering is, as we're talking about, because on this show we talk a bit about the sacred, the selfish, and the shared pieces, and we've talked about sacredness in a bit, and but in terms of just when you are feeling suicidal, and Josh, I'll specifically ask you, since you've shared your story of feeling that way, I'm thinking about suggestions for how to take care of yourself when you're in that moment of crisis. And you talked a little bit about that already, reaching out. You went back to some spirituality practices. Did I hear you say exercise in there in any way?
I do. So I talk about this at universities a lot and a lot of other places, but there's exercise. It's important, even if you're not, I realize there's some health conditions that sometimes will prevent that, maybe fibromyalgia or something like that, but if you can do it, any sort of exercise, and brain exercise is tremendously important. And so some of these I stumbled upon a little bit. So creativity was tremendously helpful for me. And it doesn't have to be something that's produced. I'm a writer, so I happen to diary all throughout my depression. And it was so useful. And I went and looked back at it, and I saw where my thoughts were going and how useful that was for me. But I tell students, and I tell anyone who will hear me bang my drum about this, you don't have to be a writer. You can be a singer, you can do an interpretive dance, you can make a macaroni necklace, whatever makes you feel better. So it's not about being perfect, it's not about production, it's not about seeing someone else's highlight reel and seeing how good they are. It's not about that. This is about you and taking that time to engage a different piece of your brain and to help you work things out. So creativity, exercising the brain was so important.
So I wonder too about these thoughts and beliefs that people experience. From the work that we've done, people will make statements like, I'm worthless, there's no one who loves me, my family would be better off if I were dead, or sometimes I'll have a teenager who will think, well, I wish I were dead because then that would show my parents, because they're having a moment. So what are some of the thoughts and beliefs that you all have heard people say when they're in that suicidal moment? And I'd like to talk about some ways that we can counter those thoughts and beliefs, because as cognitive behaviorists, we often want to change the way people are thinking. So can you speak a bit about that?
Well, I had an opportunity a few years ago to speak to a young woman who was on Facebook, and she reached out to me, and she had seen a program that I had done, and she happened to be in crisis at this moment. And so she actually, speaking of fibromyalgia, she was dealing with that. Nobody believed her because that's sort of an invisible chronic pain piece. And she had a little boy and a husband, and she couldn't pick up her kid anymore. He was like 3 years old or something like that. And so she wasn't able to be that nurturing mom, or at least to the level she thought. She was like, I think it would be better if I were gone, because then my husband could remarry, and then my son will have, and I said, okay, let me tell you this, as someone, and there was no guilt behind it, but I said, if you just let me, just give me a moment, because I want to respect her intelligence at that point, and respect her mind and let her think things through. But I said, as someone, and I'm going to share my story briefly, and I said, as someone who has lost a parent, even though we had a difficult relationship, I would love to have him back, and so just, you think your son would be better off, but you don't actually know that, and you're important and you matter, because your son is even if you're in a wheelchair and he's walking down the aisle, he's going to say, Mom was here. Mom was here, but if you're not, where's Mom? I was going to wonder, where was Mom when I got married? Now, that was more, I was showing her that there was a beautiful responsibility rather than think about your son. But it was that the counter was, oh no, you matter, you're important. And I saw that opening because she mentioned the son, and she mentioned how important he was to her. And I said, well, it flipped back around. You're important to him too. And as my dad is never going to get to see me go around the world and talk about this. My dad is never going to see me get the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, we're going to see you again.
That's right.
Well, actually, I think your dad will see you. I happen to believe that your dad will see you, just not in the physical realm.
Sure.
But what I hear that's so critical to what Josh is saying is that sometimes we use the same language when we're talking to people, but it's all in the tone of voice and all in the way that we phrase it. So instead of saying, I can't believe you're going to kill yourself and your child won't get to experience blah, 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 you ask the question. Or you painted a picture. And that's very different because that's where the compassion and the love that you were talking about that comes in. I know with the work that we do as cognitive behaviorists, we're always teaching people to write a different thought that counters the negative thought and to start rehearsing those things, because sometimes you don't believe it when you first start saying it, but if you rehearse it enough, and Susan does too, I think, but I often have people to look in the mirror at themselves, to tell yourself these things.
Yeah, and I ask them, what do you love about yourself?
Exactly.
That is something that I engage in. What do you love about yourself? And they'll start talking about themselves. And I allow them to feed into whatever else they want to go to.
Sometimes you have to help them figure out what they love about themselves.
Yeah, but
at the point that we're at, but
they say, well, I like this about myself. Well, that's wonderful. I like that about you too. That came across to me as you're speaking to me. You know, your love and your gentle nature, that's a beautiful thing. You know, people want to hear about that and what makes them them.
That's one of the things I find that when I'm doing an evaluation, when folks are first coming in to see me and to get to know me a little, and I'm learning about them and about where they are and what's going on, I don't ask them what are your weaknesses. I ask them what are your strengths. What do you love most about yourself? What are you proud of about yourself? And it is almost universally the hardest question I ask for any client that comes in my door. And so I often have to assign it as homework because, but one of the things that I also do, exactly. But one of the things that I also do is I say, when they sit there and they say, I don't know, I can't think of anything. I say, okay, well, I've known you for about 45 minutes now, and I can think of about 10 things that we could put on this list.
But that's how I come up with the name, I am worthy. Because how many people feel themselves as worthy? Especially our teens, you are worthy. And
I love that because I have a friend who said to me in college that his mother said to him, when you date someone, you need to make sure that they are worthy of you. I said, well, I like that. And especially as a woman, is that person worthy of you and who you are? So I love the title of your...
we have these little stickers that say, I am worthy, and I've encouraged my teens and my youth. I gave them a bunch. I said, when you're around your friends, give them one of these and tell them you are worthy. Because that is so important to be validated. Everybody wants to be validated.
I think just quickly, just going to this piece, this is so tremendously important, and I just sparked something for me, was when I was going through my crisis, and my mom told me that my life was important to her, that was a spark. And then there was this piece where I had to be grateful for the things in my life, and then what was going well, focusing on what's going well, and there wasn't much. I was like, I've got a job, I've got a place to live, and I've got food to eat. And then I focused on that, and I told myself that, and I spoke out loud, and I would constantly have to say that. And I would have to say things like, you're loved, you're smart, you're important, things like that, and I had to say it over and over again. I didn't believe it at first, but I had to do it because I had to trim the negative weeds in my head so I can grow that garden. And so it's how we talk to ourselves, and even if we don't believe these things in the beginning, if you give yourself just a little bit of time and talk to yourself that way, soon you're going to believe it, and then soon it's going to manifest in the rest of your life. And that's how it's worked with me. And even still, I have to talk to myself like, no, you don't get to say that to yourself.
Well, and I think that that's really the crucial piece here, and this is why we tell people to replace the negative thought with a positive thought. You have to constantly feed your spirit with it. But Josh, I think one of the other things that is crucial in your story is to also know that when a love affair ends, there's another one out there for you somewhere else. It may feel like it's the end all be all, but you're not back with that person.
No.
Okay, so I don't want to say too much of that.
Love affairs.
Okay, he's a diva now. So you see, when one door closes, another door opens. But,
Yes.
but before our time runs out, I want to make sure that we do address what are some of the warning signs of a person who is experiencing suicidal ideation. And the National Foundation of Suicide Prevention lists a number of those things. And even when we're talking with people, some of the things that we look for is how a person talks, what their behavior is, and what their mood is. And I'd like to just share a few of those things. And if you feel that there's some that we are missing, please let us know. But just in terms of how people talk, people will often talk of killing themselves. Or people these days, and I just saw this on an Instagram post, people will post little things on there that they're giving you warnings that they're thinking about killing themselves. One person had put something on like, oh, I think I should cut my hair for my funeral. And nobody was paying attention to this person saying that. And then just other little things that they were saying. So please pay attention to how folks are talking. When people say, I have no reason to live, it's great that Josh could say, yes, wait a minute, I have a job, I have this, but sometimes people feel like I have no reason to live. Or, as we've discussed a lot today, that I'm a burden to other folks. When people feel trapped, it is so important, because feeling trapped could entail a lot of different things. It could be because of your job, it could be something that's going on, because not all people who commit suicide is involved, clinical depression is involved. It could be because people are in a situation that they feel like they just can't get out of.
It's desperation.
Desperation. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And unbearable pain that comes with that. So pay attention to the words that people use, and then the behavior. I just want to go through them, and if you have things to add after that, I think is so critical. And the thing that Susan and I were talking about in preparation for this, we have parents who will come in sometimes and say, well, is it normal that my child is sleeping all day long? And well, sleep is one of those interesting things that you have to look at. Now, we know teenagers love to stay in bed for a long time, but if a teenager or a person is sleeping more than usual or less than usual, that's important. Start paying attention to their sleep patterns. Look at whether people give away their prized possessions.
Yes.
Is there aggression that's coming out more, anger that's coming out more, isolating from the family, withdrawing and staying in their rooms? Now, I know, again, if it's a teenager, that's sort of hard to tell, but pay attention to, is that behavior different? Are they acting in a way that's very reckless? Pay attention to what they're Googling and searching online. Are they looking for different ways of killing themselves? And then in terms of mood, are they irritable? Are they sad? Do they feel humiliated or anxious? Any little thing sparks these feelings. Is there rage? And so these are just a few of the things that we've noticed. But our time is quickly wrapping up. Are there other things that you all would add?
There are, and you can find them on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline website. But putting it into context, I just want to let people know that if you are noticing these things, there's a place to call. There's a free confidential hotline, 800-273-8255. It's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline website. It's 24/7. It's free. And if you're feeling like you're in crisis, you can call this number. If you know someone in crisis and you don't know where to go, you can call this number. They'll route it locally, so you're not going to get someone in Juneau, Alaska if you're here in Connecticut. So it's important to know that there is help out there.
Right.
On my website, you don't have to jump through any hoops to get it. It's impossibleproject.com/ebook, and there's a list of a bunch of resources, mostly aimed towards youth, but a lot of them are things that you can access as an adult as well. So there's just to know that there's resources behind and what to do if you are noticing some of these things.
Yeah, there's a list of resources. As a matter of fact, instead of us putting up our golden rules as we normally do, we will be putting those resources up on our website, so you can go to www.sacredintelligence.com and they will be listed there for you already. But one of the other things I want to say before we run out of time is this. We often hear the question, when do we take threats seriously? And we know that there are people who will say, I'm going to commit suicide just because they want to get your attention. But you should take it seriously. You should never play with folks saying, I'm going to hurt myself. But one of the things that we notice that parents will do sometimes is that when children, and we say this from the parental perspective, will say that they're going to commit suicide, they don't remove dangerous weapons from the house or anything that kids could use. So you want to be sure that you lock up your medications, that you put away scissors, that you put away weapons, that you lock up box cutters, cleaners. All of that you want to be sure to move out of the reach of your child, especially if your child has attempted before. Don't just say they're just playing games and trying to get my attention. You want to make sure that you do that. The other thing that I want to make sure that that people do when they hear folks talking about committing suicide, yes, it's important to listen. It's important for you to manage your emotions and don't make it about you, as I said before, but don't promise that you're not going to tell anyone. So if you are a teenager out there and you're listening and a friend tells you that they're going to hurt themselves, don't promise that you're not going to tell. That's something that you have to tell. And don't say that you immediately have to go to the hospital. It might be that you have to, but we want to get them to a place where we can talk to them and try to encourage them to get the help that they need. In terms of survivors, one of the things that I think is most critical, and this can be a little tricky, survivors often blame themselves for people making the choices that they make to commit suicide. Yes, we know that there are times in the case of bullying and people who encourage folks to commit suicide, but most often people are making those choices, and it's a choice that they made, and so survivors can't carry that guilt with them. There are many more things that we could have talked about, but we've run out of time, and we do thank you for joining us. We hope that this segment has been helpful to you. Again, we will put up on our website all the different places that you can visit in order to get help. You can always call 211 or 911 as well. Thank you so much to Camilla Ross for being our guest today, and Josh Rivedal. We hope that you all will continue with your I Am Worthy project, and if you would like to contact us at info@sacredintelligence.com. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.